we have once again gathered via Zoom to recreate the prior presentations. The record button has been pressed, so we should be good to go. I am Bill Waller, a longtime resident of Rockport with a professional background in the physical earth and space sciences. I will be introducing the topic of street lighting in Rockport, touching on recent developments, options, and best practices. My introduction will be followed by more detailed presentations from Dick Lukey, Lisa Smith, Christine Downing, Tom Mikas. So let me share my screen and get cracking. As I said, this was a well-attended event, the Light Right at Night in Rockport event, and it was a discussion of effective and responsible street lighting. And there have been some recent developments in these regards. There are options that have risen or developed, and there are best practices which myself and others will try to emphasize. The recent development is that the town of Rockport is planning to replace all current streetlights with high efficiency light emitting diode or LED luminaires. And I have pictures here of the oldest incandescent fixtures, which kind of pepper the streets of Rockport. They're going to be the first to go. They'll be replaced first because they are basically at the end of the line. They're falling apart. They can't be replaced by new ones. And so those will be replaced first with these LED luminaires, followed by the more recent high-pressure sodium luminaires, which give the amber glow. So the town currently is negotiating with National Grid to acquire these efficient and long-lasting fixtures. They will be very, very efficient, and that means that they will use much less energy, and so that will make them cost much less over time. And then they are long lasting. And so you get a double benefit from these sorts of luminaires. They're efficient and long lasting, which ends up being, I think Tom might be able to give a figure for how much more you can save with these sorts of fixtures. An issue with them is, well, it's actually a development, is that they now come available in different, what are known as color temperatures. And that it basically refers to the equivalent temperature of something that's being lit thermally. You know, if you were comparing a burner on the low setting, that would have a low color temperature, and it would appear more amber. Okay, but at a higher temperature, if you change the intensity of the burner, you would end up getting more orange, and then finally into the whites if the burner could be that hot. So this is now all available. They used to just have them in the highest color temperatures, which tend to be very brilliant and harsh, and kind of like what you would see in an operating room or in a prison yard, all the way down to 5,000 and 4,000, which were most available back 10 years ago when Gloucester switched out its lights. Gloucester it was able to choose a 3,000 Kelvin light, but now there are even more mellower amber lights available of lower color temperature. And here's the difference you can see in the spectrum. This is the output of the light as a function of wavelength. So these short wavelengths of 400, 450 nanometers correspond to the blue, whereas around 600 and 650 nanometers, those correspond to the red. And then yellow is in the 500s. And you can see that for the 4,000 Kelvin color temperature lamp, luminaire, uh, there's this big blue spike of emission. And this has been problematic, it turns out. It's got harmful um, side effects. And these latter effects include disruption of many animals' migrations, reproductive functions, biorhythmic cycles, and associated hormonal activity. For humans, the hormonal disruptions have been linked with several types of cancers. So, based on this sort of comparison, well-directed luminaires with cooler color temperatures, with much lower blue spikes, um, such as the 2200 Kelvin luminaire, they would best ensure street lighting that is sensible, safe, and healthy. As an added benefit, such lighting practices would preserve the dark skies and astronomical vistas that Rockport is known for. So, what would these 2200 Kelvin luminaires look like? Well, the town of Pepperell has already installed them, so there is a nice precedent, and they look a lot like the high pressure sodium lights that we have here in Rockport. It's an amber glow that's very similar. They're almost indistinguishable. And given these sorts of luminaires that are well shielded, well directed, and of low color temperature, is they have a reduced impact on light pollution because it's the blue light that scatters in the air the most. That's why we have a blue sky from the sun. And so that means that there's much less light pollution, and you can see things like the aurora, which I saw from Point de Chene off Andrews Point in Pigeon Cove. Um, and also, there are a bunch of people who have invested quite a bit uh, to view the night sky with telescopes, such as this Rockport Public, Rockport Community Observatory that is still in progress, being developed. It's coming soon. It's coming soon. So, uh, based on these sorts of things, we want to keep Rockport attractive. Uh, its night sky is a natural resource, and we should try to preserve it. And that's it for me. And so, uh, Dick Lukey is a founding member of the Gloucester Area Astronomy Club, and he is going to talk about the particular properties of the light-emitting diode luminaires, and then onward to the things that we can see in the night sky when the light pollution is minimized.
Okay. Well, thank you, Bill. And welcome, viewers. I'm going to kind of pick up where Bill left off about the lights. So these light emitting diodes that the town is considering, um, they do, it's a good choice to make. I mean, this is the most current technology. I think 80% of all the electrical street lighting installations around the world are now LEDs because you can save 60 to 80% on your electric bills. And like Bill said, lower maintenance costs because these things can last up to 20 years, 3 or 4 times longer than the current lighting system they have. Um, and the fact that they're going to last for 20 years means this is an important decision for the town. They got to get it right because you'll be looking at these for 20 years, right? Another benefit of these is they're more downwardly focused than the old street lights. So the more light goes where it belongs and not off into people's yards, etc. And there's a dimmable feature that they could obtain from various vendors where they can dim the lights at say 11, 10 or 11 o'clock when Rockport rolls up the sidewalks Actually, that's more about 8 o'clock, isn't it, friends?
Uh,
Yeah, so that's more cost saving and it kind of, for the night sky, that's really good. If you could turn the lights down 50%, 10 o'clock, there'd be more beautiful sky to see. All right. So whatever kind of LEDs you get, whether the harsh white ones or the more amber ones, the ones that you pick for your yard light or the ones you pick for your home interior lights, there are certain measures to consider. One is called the lumens, which is the amount of visible light released. It's how bright it is. Back in the day of incandescent light bulbs, we talked about wattage. Like you could have a 60-watt lamp in your living room, or you could go to 100-watt, which was brighter. But today we use a more accurate term. We use lumens instead of watts. Watts tells you how much energy you're using. Lumens tells you how bright they are. There's also color coordinated temperature, which Bill alluded to. That's the color of the light. Now that is measured in kelvins. Um, and as Bill showed in his slides, you can go from 2200 to 6,000 or so. It, I understand that the town is being recommended by National Grid to either pick 3,000 or 4,000 K um, streetlights, which is what people had to pick from 10 years ago. Today you can there's more variety, better lights to be had from just about every perspective. The other measure is the color rendering index, which is the accuracy of the color you see. Because the light you see at night, it's a reflection off physical surfaces. Is it red? Is it orange? Is it kind of bronze color? The color rendering would be more exacting on exactly what color you're seeing. So we know, thanks to Sir Isaac Newton back in the 1600s, that the light we see, although it appears white, like sunlight, like most of the light bulbs we look at, they're actually composed of various wavelengths of light that if you run them through a prism, you would get all the colors of the rainbow in what the human eye can see, in the visible spectrum of the electromagnetic spectrum from violet on one end to red on the other. There are wavelengths of light beyond either of those extremes, but the human eye can't see them. But whether you're looking at sunlight or LED lights or incandescent lights, we get a spectrum. So here's a spectrum that a friend of ours took, his lighting engineer, he took these with his little machine, and you can see natural sunlight at noon. So we have the whole spectrum of light. We got that blue on the left-hand side, and that blue is useful that time of day. It makes the sky blue because it's so readily absorbed by our atmosphere, much more than the others. And it also has the benefit of keeping us awake. It suppresses what's called the melatonin your body naturally produces to put you to sleep, but the blue suppresses that. That's good in the daytime, but as we'll see later, that's a real negative when blue lights are used at night. Now, here again, thanks to our friend, he took these spectra of various streetlights with different Kelvin ratings from the higher Kelvin, 4,000, up on the upper right, going left to the lower ones and down below the 2200 K Kelvin streetlight. And you notice, see the blue spike on the 4,000. Tremendous amount of blue in that spectrum. You won't see it with your eye, but it's there. And as you go down lower Kelvin, you get rid of most of it. And as Bill showed, these Kelvin ratings produce different tones of light. As to color rendering, uh, there's a scale from 0 to 100, where 100 is natural sunlight, 0 is terrible, and the higher you get to the 100, the better, more accurate colors you get from these different kinds of lights. Now, the police might like this in particular because they say, the getaway car with the robbers used, was it red or was it orange? And a better color rendering will answer that question. This was experiment was done Mount Desert Island, where they were switching out their lights, and a lighting engineer produced this uh, color rendering graphic where we see the lower kelvins produced a better color rendering than the higher Kelvin. Important point to remember. Now, that blue light we talked about has a lot of negatives for human health, for the environment, whatever. And one that usually not recognized is it produces in what the AMA is described as disabling glare, especially for people that are older who have one form or another of cataracts. And my ophthalmologist has told me that anybody who's 50 or older has cataracts to some extent, mild to bad. And this is a kind of a clouding of the lens that takes place over time. And during the daytime, they don't see colors too well. The sky is kind of a grayish blue. At night, they have trouble seeing, especially driving. That's why older people don't like to drive so much at night, because when light hits their cataract afflicted eyes, you get what you see on the right, a kind of scattering of that light makes it hard to see. And blue light has a immeasurably higher effect of glare, which keeps a lot of people, older citizens, from going out at night, from driving around town. It's all that blue light. In terms of human health, it's pretty well established. I believe there are over 1,000 studies now of the effect of night lighting on human health. And um, they found that the suppression of melatonin caused by, especially by the blue part of light, but light in general, disrupts the normal sleep cycle. And that is associated with diabetes, obesity, breast cancer, prostate cancer, a number of ailments. And Harvard Medical School, their statement here was blue light can affect your sleep and potentially cause disease. So it's important to say, if we're going to bathe the community in light, what kind of light do we want? Do we want a lot of blue light, or we want to get rid of that? You should also know that light, whether you're outside or inside, if you're staring at your cell phone screen or your iPad screen or whatever, you're probably getting a lot of blue light, which is going to make it disrupt your sleep. That's why it's a good idea to stay away for those things for at least a couple hours before you hit the hay. Now, in terms of recommending which are the healthier choices with streetlights, the AMA back 10 years ago said no more than 3,000 K streetlights, which was the lowest available 10 years ago. They're coming out with new recommendations in June. It will be for 2,700 K because those are now available, no more than that. And the Massachusetts Medical Association chimed in with the same 2,700 K. And I find it remarkable that With this kind of information, National Grid is recommending things that go against this medical advice. Coincidentally, I found out by going on the town's website that you do have a residential outdoor lighting code in Rockport whose light sources shall not exceed 2,750 K. Well, good for them. So they were ahead of the game when they came up with that town lighting code. One would hope that the choice of streetlights would follow the same good advice. Um, there's an issue about public safety with lighting. A lot of people think the more light we have, the safer it is. You know, and intuitively, you would think that's true. But bad lighting and overabundant lighting can create a lot of shadows in which crime people can hide. Um, and there are several studies that I know of that confirm that, as this one does in the Journal of Quantitative Criminology, that street lighting may enable rather than hinder street crime. That seems counterintuitive, but I guess criminals, they don't like to work in the dark like anybody else, like everybody else. You know, they can't see what they're doing. There was also a study in the city of Chicago about several years, 20 years ago, where they were having a lot of crime in parts of the town in the alleyways that divide each city block. And so they thought, well, let's put lights in the alleyways all around the city. See what you know, that should cut down crime. But before they did that, the police department, the University of Chicago, did a controlled experiment. They had all the crime statistics from these various neighborhoods. So they selected several, and they had the pre-installation of lighting criminal stats, and certain areas they left alone, and the others they put in the streetlights. And then they went back a year or so later and said, okay, how have the crime stats changed since we put in the lights? Well, it turns out that the incidence of crimes of various types, violent property crimes, overall total crime, they were lower in the neighborhoods where they left the alleys unilluminated and higher where they put the streetlights. Go figure. Again, counterintuitive, but they just figure crooks don't like to work in the dark. In terms of traffic collisions, you know, a lot of people say we've got to light up these roads more and more. Uh, it seems intuitively sensible, but the data just doesn't seem to confirm it. Here's one from the UK where they looked at traffic collisions and crime in 62 towns in England and Wales, and it found that the lighting had no effect on the numbers, whether they turned the lights out, whether they dimmed them, turned them on certain hours, etc. No difference. Now now Rockport is a maritime community. It's got ocean all around it. Various lots of people fish. They're lobstermen making their living, and we never think much of it, but light pollution can have effect on the marine environment, especially near the coastline where there are lights and where the water is fairly shallow. And we found this video from the University of Plymouth in England where they have studied the effect of light pollution on aquatic life. And I think it's kind of a wake-up call for coastal communities like Rockport. Let me just show you about 3 or 4 minutes of this.
We flood our world with light, believing more is better. But are we blinded to the impact on our oceans?
One of the clearest indications of the changes that we've made to our planet is the view of the dark side of the Earth. So if you go up into the International Space Station, for example, you can really clearly see all the cities and towns brightly lit up. The thing which gives artificial light at night its reach is the sky glow effect.
And this is the collective light from all the street lights in that city shining up into the sky and being scattered by the atmosphere, and then that light reflecting back down to the ground.
Within the water, blue light penetrates to much greater depth than the orange and red lights that we used to light our cities with. And this is giving us cause for concern that even more light pollution is reaching greater depths within the water column.
Back in 2010, hardly any lights in the world were LEDs. Fast forward to today, and more than 80% of the global lighting market is LEDs. And because of their cost effectiveness, what we find is that LEDs are being used in places where previously we never used to use lighting. We see many bridges now in our towns and cities being decorated with LEDs.
Artificial light at night is polluting our seas. We know that around about 22% of global coastlines are impacted by artificial light at night, and that is increasing year on year.
What we see now is more than 200 published impacts of light pollution on marine organisms and marine ecosystems. We're seeing a whole host of different biological processes being impacted, from coral broadcast spawning to the daily migrations of zooplankton, which is the largest upward migration of biomass on the planet. We have worked with many local species to our shores around Plymouth. We see impacts on fish movement and navigation. We see impacts on the ability of organisms to camouflage themselves and the ability of predators to find prey. If you think about any single biological process which relies on light in the sea, that process has been demonstrated to be impacted by artificial light at night.
But artificial light at night pollution is one environmental problem that we can do something about. So where we don't need to use lighting, just turn it off. And actually where we need to use the lighting itself, we can use it in a much more responsible way by making sure that the lighting doesn't spill into areas where we just don't need it. We're right in the middle of the UN Decade on Ocean Science. And one of the actions that they have adopted is action on artificial light at night pollution. This is really raising the profile and also focusing on some of the solutions that we can adopt.
The Global Ocean Artificial Light at Night Network, GoALAN, was...
Well, that's enough of that one.
We flood up.
But you get the point that, in a town like Rockport, surrounded by water, where people fish, some for a living, this light is having an effect. And the blue light, as he mentioned, penetrates more deeply than the other wavelengths in the light spectrum. Okay, so I'm going to just segue to the last part of my presentation. It's about the night sky. Rockport has a reputation as one of the best places to see the night sky in eastern Massachusetts. A lot of people come here just to see the night sky because it's relatively unlight polluted here. And we'd really like to keep it that way. Here I'm just, maybe for an entertainment, I'll just whip through some slides that show you the kind of things you can see from Rockport at night. These are all photos taken by members of the Gloucester Area Astronomy Club, either in Rockport or on Cape Ann in general. Yes, you can still see the Milky Way at night from Rockport. Not many people can. Beautiful star clusters like the Pleiades. With telescopes, you can see these nebulae out there in space. Galaxies like this. This one is, I think, over 100 million light years away. a globular star cluster here, emission nebula. Here's one you can see from Halibut Point with your naked eyes, the double cluster in the constellation Perseus, 6,800 light years away. If you don't know what that means, it means it took the light from those stars 6,800 years to go from them to your eye. And the real treasure of our night sky is the Andromeda galaxy. You know, the universe, they think, may have 1 trillion galaxies like our Milky Way. This is our closest neighbor. It's 2.5 million light years away. And on a clear, dark night from Halibut Point, you can see this with your naked eye, if you know where to look, just a little gray patch of sky. Now, here's a light pollution map of the metro area, graded by the level of light pollution. And you see down here in the left-hand corner, Boston, very badly light polluted. It gets bad all the way out to Danvers, Beverly, Salem. Gets a little better on Manchester. Essex is better. Central Gloucester is not particularly good because of lack of enforcement of its own light code. But here we have Rockport way out here, and you can't get better night sky viewing than Rockport unless you get in a boat and start heading east, getting away out here in the ocean. Because looking east from Rockport, there's not a light to be seen at all. The nearest light is in, I think, Reykjavik. So as you look east, we have really nice skies. Looking back this way toward the west and the southwest, we pick up the light from Boston, other suburbs. This is kind of an indication of the difference between city lights, say over on the left, like Boston, suburban areas, to the rural skies over here on the right side, and the really dark sky that you'd find up in Maine or 30 miles offshore from Rockport. And I would say roughly Rockport today is kind of halfway between being a suburban sky and a rural sky, but very good, the best around, and hopefully we'll keep it that way. Our neighbor town, Gloucester, used to have much better sky. Here's a photo by Lisa Smith. She took 2017, and 9 years later, roughly the same shot area. Look how much that's changed in just 9 years because of unenforced, misdirected light in Gloucester. And hopefully our Rockport won't go in that direction. So as they consider which kind of LEDs to buy for streetlights, got to remember that blue light is the kind that really scatters in our atmosphere, creating sky glow. And even though these LED lights are focused downward and not up into the sky, you still get a lot of reflection off the ground. 20–30% of the light that comes down from a street light is bounced back into the sky. And if there's a lot of blue in that really pollutes the night sky. So our estimate is that these 4,000 K streetlights that National Grid is suggesting would increase sky glow over Rockport by 25% over what we have now with high pressure sodium lights. And that's the end of my dog and pony show. So back to Bill.
We will have Lisa Smith next. Lisa was the person to suggest this event, this light ride at night event, and she represents the Cape Ann Climate Coalition. And Lisa, it's all yours.
My name's Lisa Smith. I'm a member of the Cape Ann Climate Coalition, and I will present this presentation about dark skies and the hazards of light pollution on climate change and biodiversity. This presentation was originally created by Madeline Kaplan, who's pictured here on the slide with the butterfly. She's a biologist and works as the volunteer coordinator at the Eastern Massachusetts National Wildlife Refuge Complex. So thank you, Madeline. What is light pollution? To put it simply, it's the alteration of outdoor light levels from those occurring naturally, and it's done by us humans. Light itself is not the problem. We use artificial light for a lot of positive things, but because we are using a huge excess of artificial light, and in a way where it ends up in places where it should not be, it can become an environmental pollutant. Here's a map from the 1950s until last year. There's 4 different maps, about 20, 25 years between them, just showing how much the night sky has brightened. There was a study in 2023 that found out between 2011 and 2022, the sky has brightened at a rate of 10% per year, which is turning into a big problem. The masterpiece by Vincent van Gogh, Starry Night, it was painted in the 1880s, the decade that the light bulb was invented by Thomas Edison. If Van Gogh was alive today and went to that same spot to paint, he would not be able to see the Milky Way because it's clouded out by outdoor lighting. Using more light than we need at places and times where it's not needed is wasteful. That waste has economic consequences. In the United States alone, 2.5% of the electricity that we consume is spent on nighttime outdoor lighting. 30% of that ends up in the night sky because of unshielded or poorly aimed outdoor lighting. And this results in $3.3 billion of energy per year lost on lighting that ends up just polluting the night sky. And if we look at outdoor lighting in total, not just outdoor lighting lost as upward light pollution, we consume a mind-boggling amount of electricity, enough to power 35 million homes. And producing all that energy produces carbon emissions, and this affects climate change because that's what these carbon emissions are. They're greenhouse gases that are causing climate change. If we wanted to offset that carbon dioxide, we'd need to plant about 60 million trees every year. Of course, we need and want some of that residential outdoor light, but a huge portion is unneeded and wasted, and it ends up contributing to a lot of carbon in the atmosphere. Now I'm going to switch gears a little bit and delve into the impacts that light pollution has on wildlife. And most living organisms, from animals to plants to bacteria, have some kind of internal circadian clock, meaning most organisms have evolved to be able to synchronize to the 24-hour light-dark cycle. As we might expect, light pollution causes significant impact on wildlife. Here are the sea turtles. They're harmed by artificial light. The sandy beaches across the world where sea turtles lay their eggs are also often densely populated and developed by humans. We can relate, right? Being a coastal community, it's a great place to be, prime real estate for both people and turtles. When the sea turtles' eggs hatch, that's where they're laid on the beach. It happens mostly from the evening to the early morning. And their first instinct is to head for the open water. They use the slope of the beach to tell them which way to go. But the biggest cue is that they rely on light, and under natural conditions, the horizon over the ocean is brighter than the horizon over the land because it reflects starlight and moonlight. That changes when there are lights on or near the beach. The hatchlings become confused and they head away from the ocean towards the lights. Even a single bright light can lure most of the hatchlings from the beach away from the ocean. And this is dangerous because they only have so much energy. You know, they're just little hatchlings. They get exhausted scrambling around looking for the ocean. They're vulnerable to predators, dehydration, and they get crushed by cars. Migratory birds. Most of them migrate at night because a lot of them use the stars for navigation. Predators, a good portion of them are sleeping at night. The air is calmer and the temperature is lower. This shows artificial lighting at night along the migratory routes. In the Western Hemisphere, there's over 7 billion birds that migrate in the spring and the fall. And it's a really dangerous time. The mortality rate is 6 times higher during that time period than when they're, where they're nesting and living for the winter or the summer. They're looking for safe places to stop and refuel, good habitats when they're stopping, and they're also dealing with bad weather. On top of that, they're also impacted by light pollution. A 2018 study found that migratory birds experience higher level of light pollution in the areas they pass during their migration compared with areas they stay in during their breeding or wintering seasons. Light at night can impact the timing of their migration. Birds use photoperiod, that's how long days are, to determine when to start migrating. They may misinterpret artificial light at night as longer daylight, and they start migrating too early. If they mistime it, this means they won't have enough resources for them along their migratory route or when they arrive. But more importantly, artificial light at night draws birds into urban areas, and that's not where they want to be. It's not a good habitat. There's no place for rest, to eat. There's lots of cats and tons of buildings. And the light glow from an urban area can attract birds from as far as 3 miles away. They also can have collisions with buildings. The light attracts them to places where there are buildings, and most collisions with buildings are under 4 stories high. And so here's some pictures of some birds that have hit buildings. It also affects fireflies. A lot of species are becoming endangered because they can't communicate with each other. The way they communicate with each other is through their lights. And if lights are on, they can't see each other to mate, and they don't have babies. In the presence of artificial light at night, they produce 50% fewer flashes. So artificial light really ruins their romantic evenings. Artificial light at night also affects nocturnal pollinators. Plant pollinators have 52% less interactions with their plants. That means there's less pollinating going on, less growing of things, less food for us. And 70% of moths are drawn to street lamps, and it reduces their pollination. Plants also have photoreceptors. They're sensitive to light. If their night sky is lit up, it stresses the plants and they don't thrive. There's many other species of things that are affected by light at night. This is just a few of the things that I brought up, and biodiversity is really important. It's essential for the process that supports all life on Earth, and it's essential for us humans too. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. That was truly a living tale. And now up is Christine Downing, who is the chair of the Rockport Cultural Council, and she's going to wax eloquent on the character of Rockport and the dark sky that we are blessed with.
Thanks, Bill. Bill asked me to talk about why people come to Rockport, and mentioning that artists and naturalists as well as tourists come here, maybe wanting to get away from the urban rat race for some clean air and starry skies. Perhaps most people come for the natural beauty and for the presence of wildness that's here. To quote Thoreau, "In wildness is the preservation of the world." Less quoted by Thoreau is this: we need the tonic of wildness. Wildness and wilderness are not the same. Wildness is a quality and wilderness is a place. Wildness is still accessible here in Rockport. Most often, our preservation efforts attend to what's earthbound, and then then maybe to the oceans and then to the air. As night lighting has increased, our dark, starry night skies have all but disappeared and have been forgotten, except in places like Rockport. Visitors come to Rockport and, stepping out of their cars at night, exclaim in astonishment at the stars that fill the sky to the horizon. In May last year, a neighbor and I went to Granite Pier to see the aurora borealis. There were no lights on the pier, and as we approached, we found it packed with cars. We found a spot and quickly learned that people had come from Boston and all over to see the aurora here in Rockport, where it's possible to find a dark sky. An undulating curtain of light would cover the sky and then suddenly turn into colored rays spreading everywhere. And then there was communitas and joyful voices erupting all around us. The aurora was back in July, and that time I went to the end of Bearskin Neck. The colors were even more intense than they were in May. There was a crowd of delighted visitors from all over, including in Europe. And again, instantly, we were a community united in wonder at the unfolding spectacle above us. We're fortunate to have Gloucester Area Astronomers Club group here, and the Gaxters are our celestial tour guides when they offer star parties and share telescopes. They set up in various places like Dock Square, Halibut Point, Gloucester Harbor, and they provide rare access that depends on dark skies. I watched the almost total eclipse at Halibut Point through their telescopes, where they also gave free dark glasses and provided safety instructions so people wouldn't go blind watching the eclipse. We were in the company of many people of all ages, and it felt like a large, cheerful summer picnic. The light dimmed, it got cool, and the birds stopped singing. And as the eclipse progressed, amazement displaced conversation. I used to watch the full moon rise from a little park at Cape Hedge. Often there were several others doing the same thing. It's a perfect place to see a comet, to look at constellations and meteors, and to see the stars light the night sky and reflect in the ocean. That is, until the streetlights were repaired. Now the streetlights spill into the little park and the stars are dimmed and fewer. For some time, I enjoyed seeing stars out of my window as I went to sleep. A streetlight was repaired and they're gone, but now I have hope of seeing them again. I remember being with friends on an island in Georgian Bay one quiet, moonless evening. It was lit softly with starlight. A wind-up Victrola played records from the 40s in the cabin. As we drifted outside and waded into the water, we stood in a bowl of stars. Heaven comes to earth at such a moment. I expect people who've access to a quarry around here have also had this experience. There's science and there's also the magic of this. We want both and we get neither when our world is overlit. Without dark skies, the Star-Spangled Banner seems disconnected. Would we have Mozart's Twinkle Little Star? Or When I Wish Upon a Star, How I Wonder Where You Are? Would Guiding Star make any sense? And would Van Gogh's Starry Night, what would that look like? Here in Rockport, we're at the margin, where it's still possible to be in wildness and where we're part of the wholeness. And we can see the interactions of creatures and plants and trees and rocks and wind and weather and of the ocean working on everything. We can see starry night skies and also our built environment in relation to all of us. Here in Rockport, we have a responsibility of stewardship as protectors of wildness and also of wonder. To quote Joni Mitchell, we are stardust, we are golden, and we have to get ourselves back to the garden. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christine. That is very nice. I will stop sharing. But now we got to get down to where the rubber meets the road, and that's with Tom Mikas, who is on several boards in the town, and Tom, you have a professional background in engineering, is that correct?
That's true. I have a PhD in mechanical engineering from MIT.
Yeah. So a little bit of cred there. Okay, Tom, you want to be talking about what the town has been up to?
Yep. I got my screen share going here, if you can see it.
Yep, looks good.
So this is specific to Rockport, sort of some talks about a little bit of history and some comments on what the plans are. Advance the slides. So Dick mentioned that we have a bylaw for exterior residential lighting. I was part of the resident group that was working with the planning board when we drafted this bylaw. It was approved by town meeting in 2017. And as Dick mentioned, it says there's a maximum 2750 Kelvin on the residential exterior lighting. And the reason we chose 2750 was because the lowest commonly available in 2017 was 2700. If we had to do it over again, and I'd sort of like to do it over again, I think we'd go lower. How is this enforced? Well, the planning board has authority on what we call site plan reviews. That is a development that's more than 6,000 square feet. The planning board goes into it in detail, make sure that it meets the lighting bylaw. Other than that, I have to say the enforcement is poor. To use a incorrect term, bright spot is that on the new DPW facility, although they were not required to comply with a residential bylaw, they did agree, and they did that. What about our existing skylights? We have about 770 fixtures in town. They're leased from National Grid, and we pay what's called the S1 electricity rate. So that's more than the cost of the energy. That's a fair chunk of maintenance cost involved in that rate. So of course, they're maintained by National Grid. And as people have been talking about, we have the high pressure sodium or HPS lights, about half of them. And the CCT value, the color temperature that Dick was talking about, is about 2100. We have a small number of decorative fixtures, largely downtown, that are considerably different. But these lights are so old that they're highly depreciated. And if we had to buy them back from National Grid to replace them ourselves, it would only cost about $3,000. So back in 2021, 2022, I was on a town committee called the Green Community Task Force, appointed by the select board. We did a lot of things with energy conservation. We got $1 million to do things all over town, replacing interior lighting in the school and the town hall and in the schools and some of the other buildings. We obtained funding for a consultant to buy the existing lights from National Grid, the street lights, with the intention of replacing them. So this consultant, Tanko Lighting, reviewed our existing lights, got the requirements from the police, ended up recommending 2200 Kelvin fixtures, except for the ornamental lights that are largely downtown, which didn't have a good replacement option at that time. So the savings from reducing our bill from National Grid, because we'd now be paying at a S6 rate, which is not including the maintenance. We can do the maintenance much more effectively with another contractor. That savings would pay off the lights in about 4 to 5 years. And after that, it would be pure savings, or a huge saving, much larger than would have been attained by leasing new lights from National Grid. We had intended to finance this with a program that National Grid was running called on-bill financing. Well, unfortunately, during our study, National Grid ended that program. We identified an alternative, which is called municipal lease financing, which is like rent to own. So the third party will buy the lights and they own them until you pay them with the savings on your electrical bill. And that's why I said the 4 to 5 year payoff. The town declined to use that for some unknown reason, not comfortable with using this financing method. And the task force was disbanded in 2023. So it's been kind of inactive topic about replacing streetlights until now. The current town plans, let me show you the only thing that is available in writing. This is from the town publication, The Monthly Motif, and it talks about their plans to use the National Grid program to replace the streetlights, and no cost to the town because we're leasing them and paying a big fee for the lease and the maintenance, and that they would be replaced and maintained by National Grid. And they like the LEDs, and they want to align the lighting with the character of Rockport. That's sort of the escape clause here, to say that we could do something possibly different from National Grid, because what has been stated orally in select board meetings is that they would do a pilot test of the National Grid lights at 3000 K and 4000 K. And you've seen in the previous presentations that that's not a good way forward. So we hope this leeway in the language here allows it to be something different from the National Grid default program. So let me also take you back in time. I had a brief conversation with members of the Historical Commission, some of the members, and then I did some research on what the lighting has been in the past. So way back when whale oil was socially acceptable, in the 1770s and 1840s, we had whale oil lighting the streetlights. And that's the color temperature from those was somewhere between 1800 and 1900. They upgraded, so to speak, to a something called burning fluid, which is a mixture of some very combustible things that thankfully did not survive very long. That burning fluid produced streetlights of around 2000 to 2100. Then in 1860s to 1880s, they were using kerosene, which is a little safer than this burning fluid. And that's 2100 to 2200 K. And then prior to going with electric, the last fossil fuel used directly was naphtha in the 1870s to 1890s. And that was somewhere in the 2000 to 2400 K Kelvin. So you can see from this chart that the historical streetlights would be best match of the options we've talked about by 2200 Kelvin. And it also matches quite well our current high pressure sodium lights, which are more than half the lights in town. They're about 2100. So to me, that's what makes sense to do. Another point against the recommendation of National Grid, that there's now a bipartisan bill in the Massachusetts legislature. It's co-sponsored by our state senator, Bruce Tarr, which would prohibit streetlights above 3000. So does it make any sense at all to even include 4000 Kelvin in a pilot test? So that's our recommendation, I think, is 2200. And if you want to see these slides and other information, we have a webpage on rockportcivicleague.org/streetlights. And turn it back to Bill here.
Thank you, Tom. It just sounds so sensible coming from you.
Hi, folks. My name is Michael Deneen, and if you give me one more minute, I'd like to pull this material together, summarize it just a bit for you. We've covered a lot of material here. I'll give you one thing to take with you. Boil it down to one simple idea. No blue light at night. Okay. The higher the number of the LED fixture, 4000, 3000, whatever, the more blue light it pumps out. Blue light causes glare because it scatters so easily in the sky. That's why the sky is blue. And in your eyes. That's why you can't drive at night after a while. Okay. And listen, 4000 K would light up Rockport like a prison exercise yard. Okay, so we don't want that. You don't want those lights outside your bedroom window. Listen, I'm a member of the Astronomy Club, and I've been setting up telescopes with the rest of the members up at Halibut Point State Park for a couple of decades now. And we feel a little bit like canaries in a coal mine because the stars are disappearing. There are things I saw 20 years ago that are simply not visible anymore. The sky is getting brighter and brighter. There's 4 lines from Wordsworth sometime around 1805 that are applicable here. He's musing about things he used to be able to see and know as a child and things that you forget, you can't get back to. And it's turn wheresoever I may, by night or day, the things which I have seen, I now can see no more. All right. Some nights we can't even see the Milky Way anymore with the naked eye at Halibut Point State Park. We've still got a starry sky. We've got the ocean. The next light is in Portugal. We can hang on to this, but it's getting brighter and brighter, and the stars are going out pretty soon. When we set up stuff like 4000K streetlights and spotlights pointing up at buildings into the sky, the night sky is going away. Think about your children. Think about your grandchildren. You're not leaving them the sky. Since the dawn of humankind, we've always had the night sky to remind us to go out and confront the infinite every once in a while, to see clearly what it is we're a part of and what we're connected to. So let's try and hang on to that. All right. Stay away from 4000K and 3000K streetlights because they have a lot of blue light in them, and that's easy to understand. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
I'd like to end with this cautionary tale that comes from Timothy Brothers, who heads the observatory for MIT. It's in Westford, Massachusetts. And he gave this testimony to the Joint Committee on Telecommunications, Utilities, and Energy. I guess that was a state committee. And this was his second session. And he talks about last session, I stated that sky glow above Wallace Observatory was increasing each year at a rate of 3%. Today, we have essentially crossed the red line. We have lost the Milky Way. This increase has accelerated to nearly 4% per year. The resulting impact is already being felt, and this limits us to which objects we can study, whether they be several kilometer-wide asteroids or exciting new worlds called exoplanets. Many have effectively disappeared from view of our largest telescopes. But he kind of ends kind of in the middle of his testimony, he talks about what has been happening near Westford in the town of Pepperell. In Pepperell, light pollution has been measured to be increasing at a rate of 6% per year, far outstripping our nearly flat population growth. Last time I told you we would lose the Milky Way in a few short years. I'm happy to report Pepperell has gone the other direction since we last spoke. They installed the 2200 Kelvin luminaires, and that pretty much saved the day for Pepperell. So if anybody else has any further comments, we can draw this to a close. Have you all said your pieces? Okay. Well, thank you all for gathering once again. And this will be made available through Tom's website. What's the name of that website?
It's the rockportcivicleague.org/streetlights. I can share that again.
All right.
That QR code will take you directly there.
Okay. And it'll probably get shared elsewhere as well. Thank you for your attention. So long.